This happened a couple of years back, during what I can only describe as a really weird transitional period in my life. I was 24, fresh off a pretty bad breakup, and had just moved into my first ever solo apartment in a town where I knew exactly one person. It was that first week of October, when the air gets sharp and everything smells like wood smoke and dying leaves. It's my favorite season, but I can't lie, living alone was making me feel pretty isolated, and the quiet was starting to get to me. I figured the best thing to do was to make the place feel more like a home, so I decided to go all in on fall decorations. I spent a Saturday morning driving around the back roads outside of town, just exploring. That's when I saw this little hand-painted sign propped up on an apple crate that just said, "Farm Stand." I pulled over, and it was this old guy, probably in his 80s, sitting in a folding chair next to a table with a few pumpkins and some jars of honey. And next to the table, slumped against a fence post, was this scarecrow. It was clearly handmade: burlap sack head, flannel shirt, patched up jeans stuffed with straw, but something about it really caught my attention. The face wasn't just a goofy painted smile, it was detailed. The button eyes seemed a little too dark, and the stitched mouth was turned down in this subtle, almost melancholy frown. It was weirdly expressive. I asked the old man how much he wanted for it. He just looked from me to the scarecrow and back again, and said I could have it for $10. It was a steal, but for whatever reason, the way he said it rubbed me the wrong way. He seemed almost relieved. I figured he was just a quirky old farmer, so I paid him, wrestled the thing into my back seat, and headed home. I propped it up on my little second-floor balcony, positioning it so it was looking out over the parking lot. It actually looked pretty cool, genuinely spooky in a classic Halloween kind of way. For the first few days, everything was fine. But then, little things started happening. I was lying in bed one night and heard this soft, rhythmic thumping sound. It was coming from the living room. I got up and checked, and I realized it was just the scarecrow's arm, lifted by the wind and knocking gently against the glass of the balcony door. It didn't make any sense that the wind was strong enough to move its whole arm like that, but I just brushed it off and went back to bed. A day or two later, I came home from work, and I swear the scarecrow's head was tilted at a different angle. I had specifically positioned it looking straight ahead, but now it was turned slightly, so it was facing my apartment door. I got this really cold feeling in my stomach, but I just told myself I was being paranoid. The wind must have shifted it. I was living alone, probably just on edge. It's safe to say I was trying hard to rationalize it. The thumping against the glass became a regular thing on windy nights, but sometimes it sounded less like a thump and more like a scratching. A dry scraping sound, like brittle twigs being dragged across the pane. It freaked me out, but I'd just turn up the TV and try to ignore it. The moment I couldn't ignore it anymore happened about a week later. I got up one morning to make coffee, and as I walked through the living room, I saw something on the floor. It was a single, long piece of straw lying on the carpet about a foot inside from the balcony door. I stood there staring at it for a long time. The door had been locked all night. I checked the weather stripping around the frame. There were no gaps. There was absolutely no way for that piece of straw to have gotten inside. That's when it hit me. I instantly connected the dots between the weird sounds, the shifting position, and now this. My logical explanations were falling apart. That night, I was a wreck. I was sitting on my couch trying to watch a movie, but I couldn't focus. It was a completely still evening, not a breath of wind. The trees outside were motionless. And then I heard it. A sharp, distinct tap, tap, tap on the balcony door glass. It wasn't the dull thump of a straw arm. It was a hard, deliberate sound, like someone rapping their knuckle on the window to get my attention. My blood ran absolutely cold. I couldn't bring myself to look directly at the door. Instead, I looked at the dark, reflective screen of the TV. And in the reflection, I could see the silhouette of the scarecrow. It wasn't slumped over anymore. It was standing upright. And one of its arms was raised, its straw fingers pressed right up against the glass. I don't think I've ever moved so fast in my life. I didn't even scream. It was like all the air had been vacuumed out of my lungs. I scrambled off the couch, grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, and just bolted. I ran out of my apartment and down the hallway, not stopping until I was in my car in the parking lot, fumbling with the ignition, my hands shaking so hard I could barely get the key in. I locked the doors and just drove, with no idea where I was going. I ended up calling my brother, hysterical, and spent the night on his couch. He came back with me the next morning. I was damn near terrified to even walk back into my own apartment. When we opened the door, everything looked normal. I cautiously peeked into the living room. The scarecrow was slumped against the balcony railing again, exactly how I had first positioned it. The piece of straw on the carpet was gone. My brother, of course, thought I had a nightmare or was just completely stressed out. He said I was letting my imagination get the best of me. But he saw how genuinely terrified I was, and he agreed to help me get rid of it. We put the entire thing into a heavy-duty trash bag. I can't explain the feeling of carrying it, the way its button eyes seemed to follow me even through the black plastic. We drove it to a dumpster behind a strip mall 2 towns over and threw it in. I've never felt such a profound sense of relief in my entire life. But even after it was gone, for months, I'd hear things at night. Faint scratching sounds that I'd tell myself were just branches, even though there were no trees near my balcony. I don't know what that thing was, or why that old farmer was so eager to sell it. All I know is that sometimes, when I'm about to fall asleep, I still see that dark reflection in the TV screen, with its arm raised, tapping to be let in. This was back in 2018, my sophomore year of college. I was finally living in an off-campus house with my 3 best friends, Liam, Chloe, and Noah. It was our first taste of real freedom, and we were soaking it all up. That year, the fall season felt especially perfect. The air in our little New England college town was crisp, the leaves were turning these insane shades of red and orange, and we were on a mission to do every single cliché autumn activity we could think of. We'd already done apple picking and haunted hayrides, so for this particular Friday night, we decided to tackle the one thing we'd been putting off: the Black Creek Corn Maze. Everyone knew about this place. It was legendary for being legitimately difficult to solve, and the farm that ran it really leaned into the spooky aesthetic. We drove out there, about 45 minutes from campus, and the sun was already starting to dip below the trees. When we paid for our tickets, the kid in the booth handed us a little slip of paper with the rules on it. Most of it was standard stuff: no running, no damaging the corn, but the last 2 rules kind of rubbed me the wrong way. They were in all caps: stay on the designated path at all times, and the maze closes promptly at 9 p.m. All patrons must be exited by then. It just seemed overly aggressive. Liam joked that they probably just let a bear loose in there after 9 to chase everyone out. We all laughed about it. For the first hour or so, it was exactly what we wanted. It was fun. We were making wrong turns, laughing, and just enjoying the cool night air. The corn stalks were way taller than any of us, probably a good 10 feet high. So once you were in there, you couldn't see anything but the path in front of you and the stars above. But as it got darker, the vibe started to shift. The paths all started to look the same, and the rustling of the corn in the wind began to sound less like nature and more like footsteps. We'd been walking for what felt like forever when Chloe realized she hadn't seen Noah in a few minutes. We figured he'd just taken a different turn, and we'd run into him at the next junction. We called out his name a few times. At first, it was casual, but after a few minutes of just our own echoes answering back, a little bit of unease started to creep in. We kept walking, calling his name every so often. Then we heard a voice call back, "Yeah, over here!" It sounded like Noah, but it was distant, and for whatever reason, it seemed to be coming from our left through a solid wall of corn. There was no path over there. Liam shouted, "Where are you, man?" The reply came back, a little distorted by the wind and the rustling. "Just come through. I found a shortcut." That didn't make any sense. The whole point was to follow the path. Why would there be a shortcut? I got a really bad feeling, but Liam, ever the leader, said he must have found something. Come on. He started to push his way through the dense stalks. Chloe and I hesitated. I called out one more time, Noah, that's not funny. Just get back on the path. There was no response this time, just silence. The wind completely died down, and the silence was suddenly deafening. It's safe to say we were all officially freaked out. That's when it hit me. I remembered the rules on that stupid slip of paper. Stay on the designated path. We stood there for a second, just listening, and then we heard a sound. It wasn't Noah's voice. It was a loud, wet crack, like a huge tree branch snapping in half, and it came from the exact spot where we'd heard the voice. It was instantly followed by the most frantic rustling I have ever heard, like something enormous was just thrashing around in the corn, moving incredibly fast. But it was moving away from us. We didn't wait to find out what it was. All three of us turned and ran. We sprinted blindly through the maze, our hearts pounding in our chests, not even trying to solve it anymore, just trying to get out. Every shadow looked like a figure. Every rustle of a leaf made me damn near jump out of my skin. We burst out of the entrance of the maze, gasping for breath, and found Noah standing there by the ticket booth, texting on his phone. He looked up at us, totally confused. Whoa, what's with you guys? I've been out here for like 20 minutes. You guys were taking forever, so I just followed the signs for the exit. I tried to catch my breath and asked him if he'd been calling for us from inside the corn. He just stared at me. No, he said, I haven't said a word. I thought you guys were right behind me. The blood drained from my face. We tried to explain what we heard. The voice that sounded just like him, the shortcut, the snapping sound. He thought we were messing with him, trying to scare him. He never believed us. We never figured out what was in that maze with us that night. I don't know what we would have found if we had pushed through that wall of corn or what made that sound. All I know is that we were being lured off the path by something that could imitate my friend's voice perfectly. We never went back to a corn maze again, and to this day, whenever I drive past a cornfield at dusk, I feel this icy knot in the pit of my stomach, and I can't help but think about what was hiding in there, waiting. This happened the first autumn after I graduated college. I was 22 and had taken a job in this tiny, picture-perfect town nestled deep in the mountains. I didn't know a soul there, and I was living in a small studio apartment right above a bookstore on the main town square. I can't lie, it was pretty lonely, but I was trying to make the best of it by embracing all the local culture. And in this town, the biggest event of the year was the annual Glimmer Creek Harvest Festival. The centerpiece of the whole festival was this tradition they called the Harvest Lord. Every year, the townsfolk would build this massive 9-foot-tall effigy out of wicker and corn husks. It was a whole community thing. For the week leading up to the festival, it would stand in the middle of the town square. I thought it was a charming, quirky tradition, but something about the Harvest Lord itself rubbed me the wrong way. It wasn't the body, it was the head. Instead of a burlap sack or a pumpkin, its head was a massive pale gourd, and someone had carved a face into it. It wasn't a cartoonish or spooky face, though. It was unsettlingly realistic, with deep-set eyes and a thin, downturned mouth. It looked sorrowful. For whatever reason, it gave me the creeps. I started noticing other weird things. In the evenings, I'd see older residents walk by the effigy and leave little things at its feet. A dried apple, a bundle of herbs, a small carved piece of wood. They'd do it when they thought no one was watching, with this strange, almost reverent solemnity. A couple of nights, looking down from my apartment window, I could have sworn the Harvest Lord's head was tilted at a different angle than it had been that afternoon, angled just slightly up towards my window. I figured it was just a trick of the shifting shadows from the streetlights. It didn't make any sense for it to move, so I brushed it off. A few days before the festival, I was woken up late at night by a strange sound from the square below. It was a dry, whispery, scraping sound. It sounded like a big pile of dead leaves being dragged across the cobblestones, but when I looked out the window, the air was completely still. Not a single branch was moving on the trees. I saw nothing out of the ordinary, just the Harvest Lord standing motionless in the center of the square. I told myself it must have been a raccoon or some other animal rooting around. I was just letting the isolation get to my head. The night of the festival was the point of no return. The whole town was out, and the main event was the parade, where 4 designated people would carry the Harvest Lord on a platform through the streets to a giant bonfire at the edge of town. I was standing in the crowd, watching the procession go by under the streetlights. The atmosphere was festive, but there was this weird, tense undercurrent to it all. As the effigy was carried past where I was standing, not 10 feet away from me, its gored head slowly and deliberately turned on its wicker neck. The movement was impossibly fluid, and it stopped when its hollow, carved eyes were looking directly at me. That's when it clicked. My heart just dropped into my stomach. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't my imagination. I saw it clear as day. I instantly connected the dots, the shifting head, the strange noises, the weird reverence from the locals. This wasn't just a quirky tradition. I didn't even make a sound. I just turned, pushed my way out of the dense crowd, and started walking quickly back to my apartment. I felt its gaze on my back the entire time. I got inside my apartment and locked the deadbolt. My hands were shaking. I could hear the parade fading into the distance, the sound of the townspeople chanting something low and rhythmic as they headed for the bonfire. I turned off all my lights and just stood in the dark, my heart pounding in my ears. About 10 minutes passed. Then I heard it. That same dry, scraping, rustling sound. But it wasn't coming from the square below. It was coming from right outside my apartment door in the second-floor hallway. I froze, barely daring to breathe. A long, dry scratching sound dragged down the wood of my door. Then another. It was the sound of wicker and brittle husks. I backed away from the door, my eyes wide in the darkness. Then, slowly, horribly, the brass doorknob began to jiggle. It turned one way, then the other, rattling in its socket. I just stood there, paralyzed, expecting the door to burst open at any second. I could hear the distant roar as the town lit the bonfire, a wave of cheering rising up from the edge of town. At that exact moment, the jiggling stopped. The hallway outside went completely silent. It's safe to say I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my floor, huddled in a corner, until the sun came up. I never looked through the peephole. The next day, I called in sick to work, packed a single bag, and left. I didn't even wait to get my security deposit back. I just drove until that town was a speck in my rearview mirror. I have no idea what that thing was, or what the townspeople were really doing. Was the thing I saw just a vessel? Or was the Harvest Lord they burned in the bonfire just a decoy while the real one walked the streets? I don't know, and I never want to find out.